No, this is one. Hello, everybody. Oh, and I did the boomer thing. Boom. There we go. Okay. Oh, my goodness. So, who's in the house? People you got post. Who's in the house? Good evening, everybody. It is your Saturday evening Bible study, and we are on Cain Able, the biblical series 5. So now, share screen. Let me pull that up. Pulling it up. There we go. The hostile brothers. And this is a trope that happens a lot in literature. Oh, and everybody say hi to Mary Lou. She's here today. You want to wave to everybody?
Hi, everybody.
So, we've seen, King Arthur. That's a hostile brothers between, what's his name? I've forgotten the name. It's between Arthur and the other guy, his dark brother. Hey, Justice is in the house. Conservative Texan is in the house. And he says, how to Mary Lou. So, all right. We got people. We just got a delay on being reported that we have people. So, but yeah, this is, some more recent things have been like Loki and Thor. Hey, DC Irish is here. Hi, how you doing? You've got 2 live streams that you have to be on there at the same time. Oh, that's awful. I was thinking of switching up the time. Maybe going on later. And so let me know what you guys think about that, because the day is longer, so I can spend longer outside and in my garden and all that stuff. So, thank you. DC says, hope all is well. All is not well. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. My back is killing me because of some gardening that I did and moving heavy things. And as a result, I got a little ache in my back. Hope the knee is feeling better. So it wasn't me with the knee, I don't think. Or it may have been Mary Lou with the knee. Your knees were bothering you at one point. Last week, yeah. So, yeah. Oh, well, thanks for stopping by, Conservative Texan. Go on. Z stream. Okay. Have a good time with that. Maybe catch this on the replay. And don't forget to hit the like button on the way out, please. Thank you. So going back to DC's comment, I pulled a muscle in my back, and so I want to have heat on it because the ice makes it scrunch up too much. Hey, Shaman, good to see you. Good to see you too. And unfortunately, when I put the heating pad on the sore back muscle, it causes hives. I can't have any heat on my body or it causes hives, and I'm going crazy. I have taken so many antihistamines, and it's just awful. And then on top of that, for some unknown reason, I gained 20 pounds in the last 2 weeks, which is not normal at all. So let me go back to the side view if we're going to talk for a little bit. So yeah, gained 20 pounds, 2 weeks, no idea why. So my doctor has now put me on a weight loss medication because this is something that should not happen. People generally don't gain 20 pounds in 2 weeks, but I happen to do it. So now we're thinking other things might be going on with my weight problem. I don't know. And then next week I go to the allergist, and this is great. So I get to take medication that can either cure me or kill me. So I had to get an EpiPen. So in case of an allergic reaction to this medication, we can do the EpiPen real fast, and I won't end up dying in his office. So that'll be fun. But it will block histamine production. So I won't have to worry about getting all these hives, because we really can't go up on any more medications than this. I mean, we're talking about some serious tranquilizers when you go that far up in medications. And so it's just holding on for dear life. I'm holding on for dear life. So I'm very glad that everybody is here tonight. And we're going to do some fun Jordan Peterson stuff. Yeah, I'm going to text other people because they're missing. But yeah, I'm thinking of doing, since it's summertime, doing these at a later time, because nobody wants to come in the house early to watch a stream. You do that once you're done with all your, having fun stuff. So anyway, let's get to Jordan now. And we left off at, if I can read that, we left off at the 58:43 minute mark. So, all right, here we go.
They make great company if you keep your relationship with them pristine.
Oh, and it has to reload it, of course.
And so, it's worthwhile. You think, well, and so the reason I'm telling you this is because people look at infants and they think this could be the potential savior of mankind. That is what they think. That's how they act. So that's what they think. And the thing is, it's also true.
Yep.
Now, how true it is, I don't know. But that's, I think, it's probably because people don't dare to find out. That's how it looks to me. In Christ's case, however, as he sacrifices himself, God, his Father, is simultaneously sacrificing his Son. It is for this reason that the Christian sacrificial drama of Son and self is archetypal. Nothing greater can be imagined. That's why it's an archetype. You can't push past it. So that's the very definition of archetypal. That's the core of what constitutes religious. The greatest of all possible sacrifices is self and child. Of that there can be no doubt. In the world, of that equally there can be no doubt. The person who wants to alleviate suffering, who wants to bring about the best of all possible futures, who wants to create heaven on earth, will therefore sacrifice everything he has to God, to life in the truth. So that's a page and a half from the book I'm going to release in January.
And we're reading that.
So back to Genesis. So we're already up to Genesis 4. And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Now, this is after Adam and Eve have been chased out of the Garden of Eden, right? So what's really cool about this, I really think that the Cain and Able story is the most profound story I've ever read, especially given that you can tell it in 15 seconds. I won't, because I tend not to tell stories in 15 seconds, as you may have noticed. But you can read the whole thing that quickly. And it's so densely packed that I just can't, it's actually unbelievable to me that it can be that densely packed. Okay, so the first thing is that Adam and Eve are not the first two human beings. Cain and Abel are the first two human beings. Because Adam and Eve were made by God and they were born in paradise. It's like, what kind of human beings are those? You don't know any human beings like that. Human beings aren't born in paradise and made by God. Human beings are born of other human beings. Right? And so that's the first thing. And it's post-fall. We're out in the world. We're out in history now. We're not in some archetypal beyond, although we are still to some degree. Not to the degree that was the case with the story of Adam and Eve. We've already been thrown out of the garden. We're already self-conscious. We're already awake. We're already covered. We're already working. were full-fledged human beings. And so you have the first two human beings, Cain and Abel, prototypical human beings. So what's cool is that humanity enters history at the end of the story of Adam and Eve, and then the archetypal patterns for human behavior are instantaneously presented. It's absolutely mind-boggling, and it's not a very nice story, right? So they're brothers, they're hostile brothers. They've got their hands around each other's throats, so to speak, or at least that's the case in one direction. So it's a story. The first two human beings engage in a fratricidal struggle that ends in the death of the best one of them. That's the story of human beings in history. And that, man, that doesn't give you nightmares. You didn't understand the damn story.
And it's so powerful. I mean, to think that this is not just a biblical story, but something that happens time and time again. That was one of the things that Viktor Frankl remarked in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He said, the Jews that survived the Holocaust had a saying, and their saying was, the best of us died in the camps. You had to be a real bastard to survive those conditions. And so all the good people, all the nice people, all the compassionate people, they were just destroyed. So when Jordan Peterson says that this has been repeated throughout mankind, he is very correct.
Now, in these hostile brother stories, which are very, very common, often the older brother, Cain, is used, and this is very true in the Bible, but it's true in all sorts of folk tales and all sorts of stories of all sorts, for that matter. The older brother has some advantages. He's the older brother, and in an agricultural community, the older brother generally inherited the land, not the younger brothers. And the reason for that was that, well, let's say you have like 8 sons, and you have enough land to support a bit of a family, and you divide it among your 8 sons. And they have 8 sons, and they divide it among their 8 sons. It's like soon everyone has a little postage stamp that they can stand on and starve to death on. And so that just doesn't work. So you hand the land down in peace to the eldest son, and that's just how it is. It's tough luck for the rest of them, but at least they know they're going to have to go and make their own way. It's not fair, but there's no way of making it fair. Well, so the oldest son has some, you might say he has an additional stake in the stability and the stability of the current hierarchy. He has more of a stake in the status quo. So that makes him more of an emblematic representative of the status quo, and perhaps more likely to be blind in its favor, something like that. So that motif creeps up very frequently in the hostile brothers' archetypal struggle. So Cain fits this big story of Cain and Able fits this pattern because Cain is the one who won't budge, who won't move. He's stubborn, whereas the younger son, who's Abel, is often the one who's more, not so much of a revolutionary, but perhaps more of a balance between the revolutionary and the traditionalist, something like that. Whereas the oldest son tends to be more traditionalist, authoritarian, at least in these metaphorical representations. And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain and said, I've gotten a man from the Lord. So there's the first human being, Cain. It's like I told you that the Mesopotamians thought that mankind was made out of the blood of the worst demon that the great goddess of chaos could imagine. Well, the first human being is a murderer. And not only a murderer of his own brother.
And also on top of this, I'm sorry, we had some chaos going on here with the dogs, and we lost Mary Lou's stream because I didn't plug it in earlier. I'm going to take care of that in a second. Hey, Logic, good to see you. Oh my gosh. Yay, Rex is in the house. So the other thing about the difference between the older son and the younger son, Cain and Abel, is that the eldest son has to deal with all the rules of society. And Abel didn't have to deal with that. He got to be out in the wild setting his own rules. So in a lot of ways, things were more constrained for him. Yeah, good to see you too, Rex. So that's another difference, and that it can be really stifling to grow up in a city, because that's the kind of thing that's going on here. Is you're growing up with eyes on you all the time, whereas when you're out in the fields tending goats and stuff like that, nobody's eyes are on you, and you can be who you want. You can, express who you want. You can grow into who you want. Whereas in a city, Cain's got all these people watching him, all these people gossiping about him and stuff like that. And so that actually can create a much bigger wound. And so, the comparison of these two different brothers was the comparison of, also what it's like to grow up free and grow up confined. And people would have understood this, that being their lifestyle back then. They would have known intimately the different details of the son that stays home and grows up in that environment, and the son that grows up in the wilds, as it were. I mean, granted, it's more dangerous to be out in the wilds dealing with lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, but it's a different kind of danger, and it has different kinds of effects on the human psyche. So, okay, let's go back to Jordan now.
So, Old Testament, that's a hell of a harsh book. And you might think, well, maybe that's a little bit too much to bear. And then you might think, yeah, and maybe it's true too. So that's something to think about. I mean, human beings, they're amazing creatures. And to think about us as a plague on the planet is its own kind of bloody catastrophe, malevolent, low, quasi-genocidal metaphor. But that doesn't mean that we're not without our problems. And the fact that this book that sits at the cornerstone of our culture would present the first man as a murderer of his brother is something that should really set you back on your heels. And again, she bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Abel there.
I don't know why I was doing this.
Communicating with his son. And you see, how primitive, how primitive.
Oh my gosh, people, I'm so sorry.
We developed the knowledge of good and evil, and then we got thrown out of paradise. It's like, that's a big problem. So what the hell are you going to do about it? Well, sacrifice. That's the hypothesis. Well, that's a hell of a hypothesis, man. That's what we're doing. We made plenty of sacrifices, even to sit in this theater, and many people made plenty of sacrifices to have a theater like this exist, and many people made sacrifices so that we could actually freely engage in the dialogue that we're engaging in a theater like this. And so it's like all of this is built on sacrifice, and sacrifice bloody well better work, because we do not have a better idea. Sacrifice. What's the counter position? Murder and theft. So let's go with sacrifice, shall we? And perhaps we won't consider it so damn primitive. His brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper. Now, some people have read into this the eternal battle between herdsmen and agriculturalists, which raged in the American West, for example, because the herdsmen like to have their herds, sheep, cattle, go wherever they were going to go. And of course, the agriculturists, the farmers, like to have. But anyways, Abel is a keeper of sheep. And that's interesting because that makes him a shepherd. And I think that's part of the critical issue here, because a shepherd, talked a little bit about shepherds before. You know, if you look at Michelangelo's statue of David, which is another staggering work. I mean, that David, he's no trivial figure. And of course, it's David who slays Goliath, right? And Goliath is like...
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, people. Dogs, what are you doing? Come on, cut it out. Oh, they are not doing their usual lie down that they do. You guys got to calm down and lie down. We're all up in my grill. Okay, yes, I will check out those Latin welcome. I will check out those. I'll put that on my list. So, and we're having technical difficulties today. There's a geomagnetic storm going on. So, you know, if the Wi-Fi cuts out for a little bit, that's probably why. So, all right. And let's start this up again.
The giant of the patriarchal enemy, it's something like that. And, you know, Middle Eastern shepherds, they had to take care of sheep, and they're edible, and the lambs are very vulnerable, and there were lots of wild animals around. It wasn't like England in the 16th century. It was like there were lions, you know.
And so this is, I jumped ahead. So this is the part where he talks about the lions being, you know, as part of shepherding and things like that. But wild animals were also part of farming. You know, you had to consider all the weeds, all the plant diseases that can happen, locusts. You got your rabbits and your other things that'll destroy crops. And it's not like they had pesticides. It's not like, you know, they had out of their fields and stuff like that, and especially not locusts. So that's funny. Latin says maybe it's really some sorcery type lefty storm messing with the communication lines. That wouldn't surprise me either. But yeah, no, I do know that there's I got 2 warnings today for a geomagnetic storm, so that is going on. But yeah, hang in there as long as you can. You know, I'll hang in there as well and try and come back up online if it cuts out like that again. I mean, my Wi-Fi bars showing on the computer are low, so, you know, we'll do what we can. But yeah, so the Able had to deal with, let's see, Able had to deal with, oh, stop it. There we go. Able had to deal with the lions and tigers and bears, oh my, and all the animal diseases that can happen, things like that. Cain had to deal with it and everything like that. And we'll get in towards when we get into the ending. I think came up with Cain's sacrifice and why God didn't like it. But We'll get back to it here.
You had a slingshot or a stick or some damn thing, and so your job was to keep the sheep organized and not let them be eaten by the lions alone. And so, and be tough and self-reliant and all of those things. You had to be tough and self-reliant. You had to be able to take care of a lot of vulnerable things. You had to be able to do it on your own. And so that's all built into the shepherd metaphor. And it's, it's a tough thing. It's not a great metaphor for modern people because we tend to think of the shepherd as someone like little Lord Fauntleroy, some little, certainly not a lion-killing, hyper-masculine lion-killing, monster. That's not a shepherd. The shepherd sort of dances around and, it's not, that's not the metaphor here. That's the metaphor here. So Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. Okay, so he's participating in the sacrificial ritual. And Abel, he brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Now, you don't know why that is, and this is built-in ambiguity, I think. Now, I think there's textual hints, but I'm not sure. Abel brought the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, he brought it's a high-quality sacrifice.
It's not just a high-quality sacrifice. It's the firstlings. It's lamb. It's not mutton. Mutton, they're both sheep products, but lamb is tender and juicy and rich, and mutton is stringy and hard to eat and all of that. So Abel is really bringing the best of the best. And there's also a clue in there where it says some fruit, where Cain is only bringing some fruit. And you could interpret that as, fruit is the later crops of the years. It's not the first fruits. It's not the tender shoots and things like that. He just waited for a regular harvest. And so, Cain has been eating all this time, and oh yeah, God, I'll get to you once the fruit shows up on the trees in autumn, so there could be that going on. There could be the idea that it's also not the best fruit. It's just any part of his harvest. So there are contextual clues here that Cain was a little lazy in what he brought to the altar.
You don't know that Abel's sacrifice is low quality, because it doesn't say, Abel brought God some wilted lettuce and then burnt it. He doesn't say that. But there isn't a sentence there that talks about how high quality Cain's sacrifice is.
Yeah.
But in any case, the Lord had respect unto Abel and his offering. So there's a hint that Abel's putting a little bit more into the whole sacrificial thing than Cain.
Yeah.
But there's also a hint that maybe God is just liking you a little better than he's liking him. And that's, I think, useful from a literary perspective, because there is that arbitrariness about life.
Yes.
With my own children, for example, one of them has had, I would say, things come easy to him. He's lucky, fortunate, however you want to put it. He seems to be that sort of person. Whereas my other child is it's just like one horrible Job-like catastrophe after another. And it's so strange to see that, because as far as I can tell, the characterological differences are certainly not accounting for the difference in destiny. The one child who's had so much trouble, as a child, was just a wonderful child. So,
and that's true of me and my sister. I ended up disabled and below the poverty line, and she's ended up living in Manhattan, and high powered, high money sort of existence, being a lawyer, and there's no real telling. I didn't know I was going to be disabled, but it happened. And so I was brought low, she's still high, and life just kind of works out like that sometimes. It's not character, it's fate.
amazingly happy and easy to get along with and fun. And they had a terrible time of it. So, who knows what God's up to? But distributing fate equally certainly isn't one of them.
Yeah.
And the Lord had respect unto Abel and his offering. But unto Cain and his offering, he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, angry. Wroth is a tough word. And these are translated many times. It's hard to get the full flavor of the words. But wroth and his countenance fell. Well, to have your countenance fell, this is sort of up. To fall is to have it be heavy, depressed, for sure, angry, for sure, resentful, probably, wroth, that's anger.
Yeah.
So Cain is not a happy clam.
Oh, come on, dog.
That his hard work is being rejected by God. Now that's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
Really. Because you think about how human that story is, You're out there. Well, we could say you might be a useless character and, you're whining about how catastrophic your life is. And it's pretty much obvious to everyone around you and you that it's your fault. You just don't try. You don't wake up in the morning. You don't get a job. You don't engage in things. You're cynical and you're bitter and you're angry and you don't try to help the people near you and you don't try to fix up your own life and you don't take care of yourself and, and then things go wrong. And it's like, well, really, what do you expect?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean someone in that situation will just say, well, that's okay. I deserve it. And they'll be happy about it. They won't. They'll be absolutely bitter about it and angry. But, put that aside for a moment. There are people who seem to struggle very forthrightly, let's say, and still have one catastrophe after another happen to them. And so there's no easy answer in this story. It's like you can fall afoul of God because your sacrifices are second rate, or you can just fall afoul of God and you don't know why. Well, tough luck for you. And then what happens in either case is exactly this, almost inevitably. Cain was wroth and his countenance fell. Well, you meet, people like this write to me all the time. I've seen many of them as clients. They say they're 20, not so often, 30 more commonly, sometimes 40. Their lives haven't gone well. They're in a pit of despair of one form or another. And not only are they in a pit of despair, but they're extraordinarily angry about it. And God only knows what they would do with that anger if they had the opportunity to give it full voice.
Yeah.
Right? One of the things I've always thought about Hitler is that, people, you have to admire Hitler. That's the thing. Because he was an organizational genius. The thing that doesn't stop people from being Hitler, people don't refuse the ambition to become Hitler because they don't have the genocidal motivation. They don't follow that pathway because they don't have the organizational genius. They've got the damn motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take 100 people randomly and you talk to them, and you really talk to them, you'll find that 5% of them would take their vengeful thoughts pretty damn far if they were just given the opportunity. And in fact, they do, because they make life miserable for themselves and often for their family, and sometimes for anybody they can come near.
And you've seen this in how people behave when they come across somebody who's not wearing a mask. This is what's so awful about these mask mandates, is that most people are angry, most people are vengeful, and they want an excuse to explode on people. And if you're not wearing a mask, that gives them an excuse to be a total, like volume 11 Karen. And so this is this whole thing, and after being, excuse me, I got a hair on my chin. After being stuck indoors for, God knows how long, these people want to explode, and they will explode on the first person who gives them an opportunity to explode. And it's mind-blowing how much of a formula for disaster we have put ourselves through. And I'm very scared for the future. So yeah, we'll leave that at that for now.
And then maybe another 20% of people have that bubble up in them on a pretty damn regular basis. So, you can have some sympathy for Cain. If you don't have any sympathy for Cain, then you're not. See, Cain and Abel also, they don't just represent two archetypal types of being. They represent. So it's not like you're Cain and you're Abel and you're Cain and you're Abel. It's like you're half and half and you're half and half and you're half and half. It's something like this. This is two different potential patterns of destiny. And you don't manifest one purely and the other zero. It's like it's like the line between good and evil that runs down the human heart. It's exactly the same idea. And maybe you're more like Cain or maybe you're more like Abel, but there's still a little Cain in you no matter how able you are. And maybe more than a little. And probably more than a little. And if you watch your fantasies, which I would very much recommend, you'll find that they show you dark things about you that will shock you if you allow yourself to be conscious of what you're thinking. So it's a good time when you're having an argument with someone, especially someone that you love, to just watch the pictures that fly out of, let's say, coming into contact with what Carl Jung called the shadow. And the shadow is the manifestation of Cain. That's a perfect way of thinking about it. And one of the things that Jung said about the shadow, because Jung was not someone you mess around with lightly, he said the human shadow has roots that reach all the way to hell.
Yes.
And Jung meant that.
Yes.
That's a metaphor for him. Now, he might not have meant it in the same way that a fundamentalist Christian from the southern U.S. might mean it. But I would say that Jung meant it in a way that's far more terrifying and also far more true. So, and Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. So there's Abel burning his offering away there. And he's in this sort of relationship with, let's call him the archetypal figure of culture, the archetypal father. And it's something he respects. That's the thing. It's an indication that the posture is an indication of respect. And then there's Cain in the background. You see his face is in shadow, and he's jealous of what's happening here. And he's going through the motions, perhaps, and maybe God just doesn't like him. We don't know. But he's going through the motions, and he's not very happy about it.
And how many people do you know that are like that? Hold on a second. Sam, are you okay, Mary Lou?
I might be.
Okay. Sam has just decided to squish Mary Lou. And how many people do you know in that situation where they're going through life and they're just going through the motions? They're not taking that extra step that they would need to take to be successful. They're very much just doing the bare minimum to get by. Those kids that just did the bare minimum to get by. And, they didn't mind that they were getting C's. They just wanted to not get yelled at, but not have to work too hard. And then you had those other kids that were the straight A students that it was like they they didn't play as much. They didn't have many parties. They were just like that. And so and it's only 8 lines long. It's only 8 lines long, and we've got all this material, all this stuff that you can glean from it. I mean, that's just incredible, absolutely incredible. So here we go.
And that's actually a phrase that you could carve into many people's tombstones as an epitaph for their life, which would be, went through the motions but wasn't very happy about it. This is really make a sacrifice. You think, well, I should change this about my life. Well, it's like, where does that come from, that impulse? It's just, well, just it manifests itself out of nothing. Or you came up with it. Well, you might want to stop thinking about that, thinking so surely that you come up with your own thoughts. You don't come up with your damn dreams, do you? Just happen. God only knows where they come from. They come from your brain. Oh boy, that's a somewhat better. But there are those amazing dramas take place in the theater of your imagination at night. You don't even understand what they are, and yet they occur night after night. And those things, dreams, they can contain wisdom. Well, it just staggers the person who has the dream once they get the key to the dream. Once they remember, it's like, oh, look, you just revealed a bunch of wisdom to yourself that you didn't know. Well, where did that come from? Well, how in the world can you dream up things? Maybe it's like there's something that's not you. Jung would call it the self. Carl Jung would call it the self, which he thought of as the totality of your being.
There we go. No, they're still having trouble with it. All right. Folks, put a 1 in the chat if we're back, because I'm having trouble with my Wi-Fi. I'm also having trouble with StreamYard itself, where I'm pushing the buttons and it's not going. So if anybody wants to put a 1 in the chat and let me know that we're back and you guys are seeing stuff, because yeah. Logic says, yeah, I just got comments now. Logic says that happens a lot to me. Latin says, my friend said it, to use a dream catcher. Yeah. Okay, we are back. We are back. We're not getting any stalling or anything like that, because I'm also watching it on my TV, and I saw it, freeze up and glitch up a little bit like that, and I don't know how to fix that. So, yeah, I'm really sorry. Hopefully, the recording will be smooth, and maybe you can go back and listen to these parts again. But man, tonight's a night.
Base, it's something like that. And that, each second that you exist is a slice of the self manifesting itself across time and space. And he thought of the self as partly the voice of conscience, whatever that is, that helps guide you when you have to make a difficult decision. And a difficult decision might be, well, what do I need to sacrifice? How do I need to discipline myself, right? What do I need to forego? Well, how do you figure those things out? Well, this picture is trying to put forth the idea that perhaps if you had established the proper relationship with God the Father, and we've talked about what that might mean, then he would help figure out how to get the sacrificial fire burning so that you could stay in a proper relationship with him across time. Well, if that's such an unreasonable proposition, what's the alternative proposition? Well, this isn't working out very well, that's for sure. Cain seems to be doing it. I don't know what it is. It's like it's as if he thinks he can only do it himself, or maybe he wants only to take credit for it, or something like that. He's not in this grateful, let's say, and inquiring, grateful and inquiring posture, because that's what a prayerful posture should be. It should be grateful and inquiring. And grateful is, thank God things aren't worse for me than they are. And you should be grateful about that, because they could be a lot worse than they are, man.
Yes.
They can be so bad. And inquiring would be, well, I don't really know how I could make it better, but I'm open to suggestions, man. If I can figure out how to do it, I'll try it. That's the humility and the inquiry. That's a humble inquiry. How could I make things better? It's something like that. And that's like, what sacrifices do I need to make in order to make things better? That's a good question to ask yourself. You could ask yourself.
That's a good question to ask God. You know, this what he's talking about now, you know, that you have the gratitude that things aren't worse. That's a perfect opening prayer. And then you have the humility part and the asking part, and you ask God, you know, how can I make things better? And that right there is a perfect prayer. So, you know, if you don't know how to pray, you can start it off with, God, thank you that things aren't worse. And how can I make things better? Amen. And that's enough. So, yeah. There's 8 lines. 8 lines, people.
Yourself that every morning. What sacrifice do I have to make things better? You can decide what constitutes better. How about that? Then it's not even as if it's being imposed on you. Come up with your own notion of what constitutes better. You know, try to make it sophisticated. It should just be better for you, because that isn't going to work very well, right? You're just going to fall downstairs if you do that, because you have to live with other people. And besides, it's stupid anyways. What are you going to do? Like, there's nothing you can even say about that. It's so, that's the attitude of a very badly behaved, hyper-aggressive 2-year-old. I mean that technically. And so you could ask yourself, well, how I have this day that lays itself out in front of me. What thing could I let go of that's impeding my progress, that if I let go of would make my life better, my family's life better, my culture's life better, my being better? And then that would give you something to do for the day, wouldn't it? It would justify your miserable life. Because you need that. That's the whole point of the first story of Adam and Eve. What do you have? A miserable life. Okay. What am I going to do about that? Well, if you just have a miserable life, you're just going to suffer stupidly and get bitter about it. That's what happens to Cain. It's like, well, how about not doing that? Because that seems to just take a bad deal and make it worse. How about making a sacrifice and seeing if you can please God and put being on track? God, that'd be something to do. What could be better than that? What could possibly be better than that? Well, that's why it's archetypal, man, because nothing's better than that. That's where it tops out. So when you can do that, you can do that every day. You have to do it a little way, because, like, what good are you, you know? You're not going to go and bring the socialist utopia into being in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
You might also think that, you know, one of the things Cain might figure out here, there's a couple of things that just aren't going right for him. Downwind of the fire, not the right place to blow from. And the fact that he's enveloped in haze and smoke and breathing it in, and the fire isn't burning, might be an indication that he's doing something wrong.
Yep.
Or he could be wiping his eyes and saying, Jesus, what kind of stupid bloody universe would produce smoke like this? It's like, yes, well, that's the more likely outcome. And the Lord said unto Cain, why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted. Now that's an interesting line, because I've looked at a variety of different translations of this 7th verse here, like a bunch of them, because the translation for that's a critical line, and the translation really matters. And so I'll tell you what I think the story is, what I've been able to figure out. And I'm sure I haven't got it completely right, but it's... So he asks, God says to him, if you do well, won't you be accepted? there's a hint there, right? It's something like, well, things aren't going so well for you. So the first thing you might think is, you're not doing well. Well, does that mean you're not doing good? Does that not mean you're not acting properly? It means it's the hint, because God is suggesting that if you were doing properly, you would be successful. I had a friend at one point who was a very bitter person. And he had a bunch of problems, and some of them were self-inflicted, and some of them were fate, I suppose. And he had become very, very destructive, murderously destructive, genocidally destructive, I would say. You could see it in his dreams, and he lived with me for a while. And I knew him very well. He was a friend of mine from the time I was 12 until the time he committed suicide when he was about 40. And when he lived with me, I was trying to help him get on his feet, which was why he had come to live with me, because he thought maybe I could help him get on his feet. And he could only take relatively low-level jobs, like he had some mechanical ability. He didn't get educated, although he's a very, very smart person. He probably had an IQ of about 135 or something like that. He was very smart. And so he was bitter, too, because he hadn't educated himself to the level that his intellect would have demanded. So he had to take jobs that were beneath him intellectually. And he had that real intellectual arrogance, because he was smart. And really smart people often come to believe that only smart matters. And if they're smart and all that matters is smart, and then the world is sort of laying itself at their feet, then they've been terribly betrayed. And then they cling to their intelligence, which is more like a talent or a gift, like it's an idol, a false idol, which is exactly what it is, and a very dangerous one, and get cynical about the stupidity of the world and the fact that their talents weren't properly recognized. And that's just not that helpful, because smart is a good thing, but I'll tell you, if you don't use it properly, it will devour you, just like all arbitrarily assigned talents, right? So you might have a talent, but it's your friend if you use it properly, and if you misuse it, it will be your enemy. And maybe that's how God keeps the cosmic scales adjusted. But anyhow, my friend was a very smart person, although not as smart as he thought he was, unfortunately. But he hadn't done what would have been necessary with that intelligence to make it manifest itself properly in the world, and that also embittered him, because he also knew that there was more that he could have done if he would have done it.
And that goes back to the whole Cain and Able thing, that he didn't improve himself to the level of his intelligence. And there was another thing I had to say about this. It was, let me go back.
Not that helpful, because smart is a good thing, but I'll tell you, if you don't use it properly, it will devour you, just like all our.
That's it. So, he knew he could do better, and his intelligence devoured him, and talents that we don't use or that we misuse can devour us. We're not doing well. We're not, living up to whatever it is that God has given us. And so in that way, we end up getting ourselves in trouble. Our sacrifices are not accepted because they're not that good. We're not doing well. We're shirking our responsibilities.
Arbitrarily assigned talents, right? So you might have a talent, but it's your friend if you use it properly, and if you misuse it, it will be your enemy. And maybe that's how God keeps the cosmic scales adjusted.
Yeah.
But anyhow, my friend was a very smart person, although not as smart as he thought he was, unfortunately. But he hadn't done what would have been necessary with that intelligence to make it manifest itself properly in the world. And that also embittered him, because he also knew that there was more that he could have done if he would have done it.
That's doing well.
He could still do.
There.
What I was suggesting to him while he was living with us, because he was, 2 levels from homeless by that point, was that he should find a job that he could find, working in a garage, working in a shop, something like that, because he had some mechanical ability, and that he should separate himself from the arrogance that made him presume that such a job would be beneath him. Because at that point, no job was beneath him. But more importantly, it's not so obvious that jobs are beneath people. Because even if imagine you have a job as a checkout person in a grocery store. It's a fairly unskilled job. You can be some miserable, resentful, horrid bastard doing that job, boy. You can come in there just exuding resentment and bitterness and making mistakes and making sure that every customer that passes by you has a slightly worse day than they need to, right? And pilfering time and perhaps pilfering goods and being resentful about the people who gave you the position because they're above you in the dominance hierarchy and talking, bad things, gossiping behind the back of your coworkers. It's like you can take your menial position, described, and turn that into a very nice little slice of hell.
Yep.
That's for sure. And you go into places like that. I always think of the archetypal diner in that way. You guys have been in this diner. There's a really good opposite diner, and there's a great video on YouTube. It's Tom Waits reading a poem by Bukowski, and I think it's called Nirvana. And it's about a good diner that he happened to visit. Bukowski happened to visit when he was on a bus when he was a kid. A diner where everything was going well. You could listen to that. It's great. I think it's great. But this is the opposite diner I'm thinking about. So you go into a diner, right? It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and you order some bacon and eggs and some toast, and then you look around in the diner and you think, it was like 1975 when the windows were last washed, and there's this kind of thick coating of who gives a damn grease on the walls, and the floor too has got that sort of stickiness that you really have to work at to develop over years, and the waitress she's not happy to be there, and the guy behind the counter isn't happy that happens to be the waitress that he's working with, and then you walk down the stairs maybe to the washroom, and that's its own little trip, and so you come back and you order your damn eggs and you order your toast and you order your bacon, and then it comes and like the eggs are too cooked on the bottom, so they're kind of brown, and then they're kind of raw on top, and they're cold in the middle, which is, you really have to work to cook an egg like that, man. But you can master that with like 10 years of bitterness. You teach you how to cook an egg like that. And then the toast. Here's what you do with the toast, right? You take the white bread, the pre-sliced stuff that no one should ever eat. And then you put that in the toaster and you overcook it. And then you wait, and then you pop it out of the toaster. And then because it's overcooked, you scrape it off. And you knock off the crumbs so it doesn't look too burnt. And then you wait till it's cold. And then you put cold margarine on it, because if you put cold margarine, first of all, not butter, but if you put cold margarine on, you can also kind of tear holes in it so that then it has lumps of margarine in it. And it's really dry except where it's too greasy. So that's like its own little work of art, man.
Everyone's eaten that
put
before.
That on the side with the eggs, and then you have the potatoes. And this is how you cook the potatoes properly. So they're leftover potatoes, and you keep dumping new leftover potatoes into the old leftover potatoes over weeks. And so some of the potatoes, they're no longer potatoes, right? They've half returned to Mother Earth. Then you flap them on the grill, and you sort of, I don't know, you burn them a bit, I guess, and then you slap them on the plate. And Jesus, you don't want to eat those, man. That's for sure. And that's the point. And then you have the bacon, and you want to make sure you buy the lowest possible quality bacon. That's how you start. And then you throw it on the grill, and your grill has to be overheated to do this. You have to cook the bacon so that it's raw in places and...
Am I still alive? Is it my TV, or is it... Did I die online? Okay, we didn't die online. Sorry.
Burnt in other places. And it has that delightful pig-like odor that only really cheap, badly cooked bacon can provide. Or maybe you use those little breakfast sausages that no one in their bloody right mind would let within 15 feet of anything living, And then you serve that, right? And you serve it with the kind of orange juice that is only orange in color. And with coffee, that's
Thanks, guys.
what would you say? It was started too early in the morning. That's the first thing. Bad quality coffee started too early, and then you serve that with whitener.
Yeah.
It's like, here's your breakfast. It's like, no, man, that's not breakfast. That's hell.
Yeah.
You know, and you created it. And then what you do, if you have a diner like that, is because you have a miserable life. If you have a diner like that, and you've really worked on achieving that, is every night you go home and you curse your wife and you curse your kids and you fucking well curse God too for producing a universe where a diner like yours is allowed to exist.
Did
and
you hear that
bloody
F-bomb?
life? So that's what God's trying to point out here is.
Did you hear that F-bomb that he dropped? Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I think I've listened to this at least 10 times, and that's the first time that I've heard that F-bomb. That's amazing. But oh yeah, people, we are the creators of hell. We are the creators of hell. We can take an awful situation and we can make it so much worse. And then we can think that it's everybody else's fault and not ours when we are actively contributing to creating hell around us, you know?
If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted. And if thou doest not well, then sin lies at your door. Well, so I looked at lots of translations for this, and actually, the next line is, and unto thee shall be his desire. Yes. What God actually says is something like this, is like, things aren't going so well for you, but if you were behaving properly, they would. But instead, this is what you've done. Sin came to your door, and sin means to, pull your arrow back and miss the target. Sin came to your door. But he uses a metaphor, and the metaphor is something like, sin came to your door like this sexually aroused cat, predator thing, and you invited it in first, and then you let it have its way with you. It's like you entered into a creative, he uses a sexual metaphor, you entered into a creative exchange with it and gave birth to something as a consequence, and not what you gave birth to, that's your life. And you knew it. You're self-conscious after all. You knew you were doing this, and you conspired with this thing to produce the situation that you're in. Jung said something about this, similar about the Oedipal mother situation. It was very politically incorrect what he said. Of course, every single thing he wrote was politically incorrect. So, how you could tell he was a thinker, by the way. He talked about the unholy alliance between hyper-dependent children and their mothers. And he said, well, it's actually, Freud thought about it as a maternal thing. I'm not putting Freud down. Freud mapped out the Oedipal situation brilliantly. I'm not putting Freud down. But, Jung was taking the ideas and expanding them outward. And, he said that there was actually an unholy alliance between a hyper-dependent child and an Oedipal over-dependent mother. And the alliance was, the mother would always offer. So maybe the kid is supposed to go off and do something that would require a little bit of courage and effort. And the mother says, well, are you sure you're feeling well enough to do it? And then the child could say, yes.
I'm going to stop it right there because Latin reminds us we are at that smoke break. So let's take a 5-minute break for everybody to go to the bathroom, get some food, have a smoke, whatever. And daily reminder to the YouTube censors, this is tobacco. I just don't like the little plastic tip that comes with it. I like the wood. So, all right, everybody, we'll take a short break and we will be back after this. I didn't do the background music. I'm so sorry. I didn't do the background music because I had to deal with dogs. So if I mute it on my computer, it also mutes the background music. So that's why no background music. But I can play some now as everybody comes back from their smoke break.
What should move forward in time with me? And what should be let go as if it's dead wood? The more dead wood that you let go of and burn off when you have the opportunity, the less it accretes around you. Dead wood. Dead wood. Dead wood. Dead wood. Here's something interesting about forest fires. People have been trying to prevent forest fires for a long time. It's because forest fires burn up the forest, and that can't be good. But here's what happens if you don't let forest fires burn. Forests collect a lot of dry branches, right? Because tree branches die, and wood falls on the forest floor and collects. The amount of flammable material keeps increasing with time. And that's not so bad if it's wet, but if the amount of flammable material is increasing and it gets really dry and then it burns, then you have a real problem. A forest fire can burn so hot that it burns the topsoil right off. In which case you don't have a forest at all anymore, you just have a desert. Dead wood. Dead wood.
Do you want to sit down? We can start the show again. Do you want to sit down and we can start the show up again?
Lots of trees are evolved to withstand forest fires of a certain intensity, and some won't even release their seeds unless there's been a fire. And so, a little bit of fire at the right time can stop everything from burning to the ground. And that's also a really useful insight and metaphorical insight into the nature of sacrifice, right? It's also a lot easier to let go of something when you're deciding to let go of it because you've decided yourself that you're done with that. It's a weak part of you. It needs to disappear. You do that yourself, it's much better and much easier than it is if it's taken away from you forcibly, in which case you're very much likely to fight it. Dead wood. Dead wood. Dead wood. Dead wood. As you elevate your aim, you create a judge at the same time. The new ideal, which is an ideal you, that becomes a judge because it's above you. The judge tells you what's useless about yourself, and then you can dispense with it. And you want to keep doing that, and then every time you make a judge that's more elevated, then there's more useless you that has to be dispensed with. And then if you create an ultimate judge, which is what the archetypal imagination of humankind has done, say, with the figure of Christ, you have a judge that says, get rid of everything.
Sam! Sam! I know it's okay, it's just a dog.
Dead wood. It's a phoenix-like process, right? You're shedding all those elements of you that are no longer worthy of the pursuits that you're evaluating. And then I would say the idea here is that as you do that, you shape yourself ever more precisely into something that
can withstand the tragedy of life and that can act as a beacon to the world. That's the right way of thinking about it. Maybe first to your friends and then to your family. It's like it's a hell of a fine ambition, and there's no reason that it can't happen. You know, every one of you knows people who are really bloody useful in a crisis and people that you admire, right? You could think of all those people as partial incarnations of the archetypal Messiah. That's exactly right. Dead wood. Dead wood. Dead wood. Dead wood. And the more that manifests itself in any given person, then the more generally useful and admirable that person is in a multitude of situations. And we don't know the limit to that.
And we're back. So Mary Lou had to go to the bathroom and she's back now. And we had the dogs barking, obviously. And sorry about that. They are some kind of hyper tonight. And so are the squirrels. So I think we may be getting some snow tomorrow or not. I got to check on that. But yeah. Hey, how's everybody doing? Thanks for sticking around. You guys are the best. Oh my gosh. So we're going back to this talking about this Oedipal complex with kids and their mothers, and I know somebody like this, and they're like this because they were disabled as a child, and so they always got their way with everything, and they always their parents didn't want to tell them no about any toys or anything like that, because they were mostly in the hospital their entire child life. They weren't supposed to live past the age of 12, and he's now 30, and he bless his heart, he has an anger management problem. He knows how to throw a temper tantrum more than any other person that I've run into. Yeah, screaming at the top of the lungs to the point where the neighbors call the cops because they're worried about people's safety in the house. And he'll scream that way at video games. It's not even a bad situation. It's just he throws adult-sized temper tantrums. And his marriage is struggling because of it. He doesn't know how to deal with the word no. He doesn't know how to deal with setbacks or anything like that. He's never been a kid on his own trying. He's always been very, very protected and coddled and spoiled. And now that he's in a marriage, it's not working out well. So, and I've got this weird, my face today is like a balloon, and my hair, you can't see it, but that's why I keep wiping my face and everything like that, is that these little hairs, oh gosh, are sticking to my face. And like my face is static electricity charged or something. I don't know what. And yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun. So yeah, Beatnik, damn, his ancestors were so badass and beat some badass named Nick that he became known as Beatnik. Oh, I walked into that one. Latin Patriot. That was awesome. Thank you. Oh, and I'm getting hives. Oh, I got the heating pad on and I'm already getting hives again. I took, what was it? An hour ago, I took more antihistamines. So tired of this. So tired of the hives. So tired of the hives. I wish I knew what was causing them. So the doctor says that in 75% of cases, you never know what you're allergic to. All right, now where does this cord go? Because there it is. All right. I'm going to turn the heating pad off. Aha! off, not high, off, so that I don't get any more hives. But hair, stop it. All right, there we go. So, but anyway, back to Mr. Peterson.
Or the child could say no, and then, be put in bed and babied and all of that. And but the thing is, the child made the damn decision too. And you might think, well, that's pretty harsh, but just because children are little doesn't mean they're stupid. And you don't know children if you don't know how children know how to manipulate, because they are staggeringly good at that, because they're studying you nonstop, trying to figure out A, what you're up to, and B, how they can get what they want in the way that they want it. And so they can play a manipulative game, no problem, especially if they're well schooled in it. And so it's sort of like that. It's like maybe the mother is a little timid and a little inclined to overprotect, and maybe the child is a little manipulative and a little willing to not take that courageous step out in the world and to regress into infantile dependency instead. And then you get a terrible dynamic building across time that is like a vicious circle, or like a positive feedback loop. It just expands and expands and expands. Because sometimes in families you see a hyper-dependent child and a perfectly independent child and same mother. So obviously, mothers are very complex, and mother for child A and mother for child B are not the same mother, even if they happen to be the same human being. The literature is quite clear on that. But you get my point. But God's idea was, not only are you not doing well because you're not doing well, but you're not doing well because you've actually really spent a lot of work figuring out how to not do well. This is like creative effort on your part. And if you read about truly malevolent people, and you could start with the Columbine killers, because they left some very interesting diaries behind. So I would recommend them. There's plenty of serial killers you could read about, and the people who've really gone out and done dark things. And I've read more than my fair share of that sort of thing and understand it quite well. If you really want to have your countenance fall and be wroth, 10 years of brooding on your own catastrophe, sort of alone, and letting your fantasies take shape, and egging them on, and allowing them to flourish and, let's say, take possession of you, because that's exactly the right way to think about it. Mm-hmm. That'll get you somewhere like this.
Yes.
And there are more people who are like that than you think, and you're more like that than you think.
I can verify that from personal experience. I was very, very angry that I got sick for a long time. Very angry. I was very angry that nobody wanted to talk to me and help me out to process my thoughts and my feelings about getting sick. And there's still a lot of anger in me about that. I mean, it's welling up now with all these, I got this symptom and that symptom, and, this treatment may kill me, and that treatment was supposed to work but didn't work as well as we hoped. And, just that whole scenario, that whole energy around that makes me so angry, so angry. And, I try my best, because there's still nobody who really wants to talk to me about it. I try my best to not let it seep out into the world, but I'll notice I'll get a little short with the dogs, and I can be a little pushy with them and things like that. So, it's a tough balance. It's really tough not to get angry when these things are besetting you. And so I can totally understand, and being mostly alone and not being able to talk to anybody about it and process the feelings, I can totally understand that kind of rage. Intimately, I understand that kind of rage. So.
Well, so Cain, he's obviously not very happy about this whole answer, obviously, because the last thing you want to hear if your life is turned into a catastrophe and you take God to task for creating a universe where that sort of thing was allowed, is that it's your own damn fault, and you should straighten up and fly right, so to speak, and you shouldn't be complaining about the nature of being. But that is the answer he gets. And so then what happens? Well, we have to infer that if Cain was angry before, that he's a lot more angry now. And of course, that's exactly what the story reveals. And Cain talked with Abel, his brother. And it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. I'm going to read you something else now. This is foreshadowing again. This is from the same chapter, by the way. Do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Jesus was led into the wilderness, according to the story, to be tempted by the devil. Matthew 4:1, prior to his crucifixion. This is the story of Cain, restated abstractly. Cain is far from happy, as we have seen. He's working hard, or so he thinks, but God is not pleased. Meanwhile, Abel is dancing away in the daisies. His crops flourish, women love him.
They've got something wrong there. Yeah, it's his flocks flourish, not his crops. Abel was not, he wasn't given inheritance of land. But I needed to stop for this. Latin Patriot says, my friend Rachel passed away very, very young in her 30s. Everyone that knew her labeled her as a hypochondriac, but she actually was sick. They judged her as mentally ill when she actually had Lyme disease. That is so brutal. That is so brutal. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And that's, I've gotten that, it's all in your head. You're making this up for attention. This is just because you're a woman. And those are things that doctors have told me, let alone strangers or friends or family members, things like that. And so it's really rough. That just adds insult to injury. So I'm very sorry for your friend there. And it's oof, to be told that it's all your fault. So we'll get back to Cain here.
First of all, he's a pretty good guy. Everyone knows it. He deserves his good fortune. All the more reason to hate him. I used to joke when I used to teach at Harvard, and now and then my wife would have some of the undergraduates over. We used to joke afterwards, because many of them were very remarkable kids, like they were super smart, they were athletic, or they had some dramatic ability, or they were musicians, or they'd done some spectacular charitable work. Because basically, to get accepted into Harvard, you had to be top of your damn school, and then you had to have at least two other outstanding things going for you, And what was so annoying about most of these kids, this was our joke, was you really both liked them and respected them. It's like, my joke was, you'd think they would have had the good graces to be like dislikable sons of bitches, at least with all those other great things going for them. They had to add like respectability and likability to it as well. So you thought, well, it really couldn't happen to a better person. It's like, good God. Well, that's Abel's situation, It's like, and the funny thing too is that that's an ideal. That's the ideal, right? Because an ideal person, let's say, would be someone who you would want to be like, and someone who is operating in the world like you would want to operate, and someone who fortune was smiling on, and someone who is making the right sacrifices. It's really what you would want to be. And so Cain kills that. Right, so it's a psychological story too. Mm-hmm. And you see this in the cynicism that people have about people who have done well in the world. They're always looking for some reason why they've done well. They must be crooked, or they must be conniving, or they must be arrogant, or they must be psychopathic, or
colluding.
All of those things exist, but it's a very bad trick to play on yourself to make the proposition that the person in the world who represents your own ideal is that ideal because of despicable reasons. Because what you do is train yourself that the ideal that you should pursue can only exist if it's motivated by despicable reasons. And then what? Not only is Abel, your brother, dead as your brother in the field in reality, but you've also slaughtered your own ideal. Well, then what the hell are you going to work for? Well, how are you going to live then? Well, bitterly and miserably, that's for sure. Bitterly, miserably, and hopelessly. That's how you're going to live. And it's so rare that I see, especially publicly, that people honestly admit with sports figures, they'll do it. That's one place where that seems to happen. But it's so uncommon for expressions of admiration and gratitude to manifest themselves in any public communication of any sort. Newspapers, TV, YouTube, Twitter. It's almost always undermining and backbiting and criticism, and very often directed to people who have often done little else but bring good things into the world for other people. And that's part of why this is such a profound story.
Yep.
He's a pretty good guy. Everyone knows it. He deserves his good fortune. All the more reason to hate him. That's for sure. Cain broods on his misfortune like a vulture on an egg. He enters the desert wilderness of his own mind. He obsesses over his ill fortune and betrayal. He nourishes his resentment. He indulges in ever more elaborate fantasies of revenge. His arrogance grows to Luciferian proportions. I'm ill-used and oppressed, he thinks. This is a stupid, bloody planet. It can go to hell. And with that, he encounters Satan in the wilderness and falls prey to his temptations.
Now, how many people do we hear nowadays saying, I'm ill-used and oppressed? You know, especially the oppressed part. But I'm going to look up the ill-used part. I mean, where have we heard I'm oppressed? Where do we know the oppression Olympics happening? You know, and what are they doing? They're bringing Luciferian proportioned tragedy to the world. They're burning down cities. So, you know, the people. Ugh. I'm going to look up ill-used definition just so I know that I've got it right. Because I want to ill-used, ill-use. Yeah. Now give me a definition. Mistreatment. So people running around saying they've been mistreated and are oppressed. That's exactly it. And we've seen what people can do when they believe that they have been mistreated and oppressed. That's a nasty combination because that happened all last summer. It's just it's a sinister combination.
And he does what he can in John Milton's unforgettable words, to confound the race of mankind in the first root and mingle and involve earth with hell, done all to spite the great creator.
Yep, that's what they do.
He turns to evil to obtain what good forbade him, and he does it voluntarily, self-consciously, and with malice.
And that's the difference between murder.
Let him who has ears hear.
And homicide, is
so
intent.
That's the first two human beings. The resentful, bitter failure taking an axe to the admirable success.
Doesn't that happen all the time?
Then the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?
Shocking.
He said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. Now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. You know, if you want to understand that, which I would recommend, you could read Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. It's a great novel. I think it might be the greatest novel ever written, because I haven't read every novel. But in my experience, it's the greatest novel.
We're going to come back to Crime and Punishment. If you guys want to go over and show Warrior Z some love, Lawrence just let me know that a bunch of trolls were coming after her, and that she was crying. So if y'all want to pop over there for a bit, I can take a little break here, and we can show our support. So that is the trolls. We were just talking about people who turn into trolls. This is the same sort of energy. They're bitter, they're resentful, and they want to tear somebody down. They want to kill somebody, either physically or metaphysically. Yeah. Latin shaman Lawrence, if you want to pop over there real quick, and then come on back and let me know that you're back. But show her some love right now, because this is awful. Shaman, you too, if you guys don't mind. Yeah, the trolls are getting fierce, guys, and I don't know why. I don't know why. Actually, I think I do know why. It's the same sort of wrath that comes, that's been presented in this story. They thought that if they got rid of the last president and got their guy in, utopia would happen. And because utopia hasn't happened, they're now very angry. Just like it was, with all I lived to see a lot of the colonial states throw off their shackles, where they were no longer ruled by Britain or France or wherever. All the empires went away. Her live is over. All right. Thank you, Latin. Go put some comments of love then after the show, and I will too. And we'll let her know that we've got her back, because that's just horrible. But yeah, the trolls are still very much out in force, even though they got what they wanted, because they didn't get what they fully wanted. They took the first step through the election, but then the rest of it was just, it didn't turn out how they wanted. They didn't get their utopia. And the same thing happened in, these places that were no longer colonial. They thought that they had thrown off the shackles of their masters, and they were going to be able to create this utopian country, as it were, and that didn't happen. What happened a lot of times was a dictator, and things got worse. So, that I can understand why the trolls are still really out there in force and are going after people. So, yeah, I've got Lawrence says, I'm suspecting they're the same trolls that were harassing Fetty. That's some BS. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, because, trolls do as trolls do, but it's not necessary in this world. Yeah, I'll read this. Latin says, that's some BS. I hope you all know that they would never behave badly. I don't know who they is. So, but yeah, we're living in tough times, guys. We got to hang on and prop each other up as much as possible. So yeah, we're going on Warriors Eve after this. So, but we're going to finish up this. We got about 20 minutes left.
And it is exactly this. It says what happens psychologically if you commit the ultimate crime. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
We're talking about crime and punishment.
Just like Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this is that, I think the punishment that God lays on Cain it's like the inevitable consequences of Cain's action. It's something like that. It's like, well, he killed his brother.
Yep.
There's no going back from that, man. Like, good luck forgiving yourself for that. Especially if he was an ideal. Especially if he was your ideal. Because you haven't just killed your brother. and of course, tortured your parents and the rest of your family. You've deprived the community of someone who is upstanding, and you did it for the worst possible motivations. It's like there's no up from there, right?
Yeah.
That's as close to hell as you can manage on earth, I would say. And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. That too. It's like there's also no turning back to God, let's say, after an error like that, because, well, you've done everything you possibly could to spite God, assuming he exists, and the probability that you're going to be able to mend that relationship in your now broken state, when you couldn't mend it to begin with before you did something so terrible, starts to move towards zero. And it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said unto him, therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. That's an interesting thing. I wondered about that for a long time, because you might think, well, why would God take Cain under his wing, so to speak, given what's already happened? And I think it has something to do with the emergence of the idea that it was necessary to prevent tit for tat, revenge slayings. It's something like that, you know. And there's hints of that later in the text, because, you know, it's like, well, I kill your brother, and then you kill two of my brothers, and then I kill your whole family, and then you kill my whole town, and then I kill your whole country, and then we blow up the world. It's like, that's probably not a very intelligent solution to the initial problem, even though the initial problem, which might be a murder, is not an easy thing to solve. But I think it's something like that. And then the last part of the story is, that's William Blake.
And how
So
was
Adam and Eve have discovered their dead son. And Cain has become cognizant, I would say, of what he did and what he is. Right? So it's
and that's the other interesting thing. Peterson only glosses it over briefly here, but you know what isn't spoken about at all is Adam and Eve's response to this situation. You know, these were their offspring, their boys, and somehow, you know, it's like the knowledge of good and evil warring against each other. You have the good in Abel, you have the evil in Cain, and Adam and Eve have to be the parents of not only a murdered child, but a murderous child. And how that affected them had to be just fool, you know. It's stuff like that that'll rip a marriage apart instantly, you know. So that's horrid. And you can think of the effects on the town as well. You know, they have the first murderer that they have to deal with. And there's just, you can just, it's, excuse me, this is like a Zen koan. You can just really sit there and think about these 8 lines, just 8 lines. That still blows my mind. 8 lines.
another entrance into a form of self-consciousness. It's you know, the self-consciousness that Adam and Eve developed was
There you go.
enough. They become aware of their own vulnerability and their nakedness, and perhaps even their capacity for evil.
Yep.
But Cain becomes aware of his voluntary engagement with evil itself.
There you go.
Sees that as a crucial human capability. And that's something modern people, you know, it's no wonder we don't take it seriously. Like I know in the academy and among intellectual circles for decades, the idea of evil has been, it's like,
Poo-pooed.
Medieval or something? You know, the whole idea of evil, you don't, that's a non-starter as an intellectual starting place, as a topic.
Right.
And that's something that I've just been unable to understand, because I cannot understand how you could possibly have more than a cursory knowledge of the history of the 20th century, much less a deep knowledge of the history of the 20th century, and to walk away with any other conclusion than, well, good might not exist,
Right?
but evil, hey,
That certainly does.
the evidence for that is so overwhelming that only willful blindness could possibly explain denying in its existence.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually a useful discovery for me, because I also concluded, perhaps, that if it was true evil existed, then it was true by
counterpart.
inference that its opposite existed.
Yep.
Because the opposite of evil, let's say the evil of the concentration camp, let's say, or we could get more specific about it. We could say there's this one thing that used to happen in Auschwitz where they would take people off the incoming trains, those who lived, that weren't stacked around the outside of the train cars and, froze to death because it was too cold. Those who only had to be stuck in the middle where it was warm enough so that maybe the old people died because they suffocated, but at least some of them were alive when they made it to Auschwitz, and then they took those poor people out. One of the tricks that the guards used to play on them was to have the newly arrived prisoners placed like 100-pound sacks of wet salt and carry them from one side of the compound. And these compounds were big. This was a city. It wasn't like a gymnasium. It was like a city. There were tens of thousands of people there. They'd have them carry the sack of wet salt from one side of the compound to the other and then back, right? And that was to make a mockery out of the notion that work would set you free. It's like, no, you work here, but there's nothing productive about it. The whole point, it's exactly the opposite of sacrifice in some sense. It's we're going to make you act out working, but all it will do is speed your demise. And maybe we can decorate it up a little bit, because not only will it speed up your demise, it will do it in a very painful way, while simultaneously increasing the probability that other people's demises will be painful and sped up. It's a work of art, that's for sure.
We just read about this.
To know about that sort of thing and not regard it as evil means, well, you can figure out what it means for yourself. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived. And one of the criticisms, a fairly common criticism of these biblical stories is, well, if Cain and Abel were the only two people and from Adam and Eve, it's like, where did all these other people come from? And doesn't that make the story like simple-minded? It's like, no, that makes the reader simple-minded.
Oh,
Really, that's the best criticism of this you're going to come up with? You might say, you missed the point. That would be the right response. You missed the point. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch, and he builded the city. And so it's Cain that builds the cities and starts the civilization, and that's pretty rough too, right? So it's the first fratricidal murderer who builds the cities after the name of his son Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad, etc., going through the generations. And Lamech took unto him two wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. So this is an attempt to flesh out the genealogy and to describe how culture started in some sense in these tribal communities. And Ada bare Jabal, and he was the father of such as dwell in tents and of such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal, and he was the father of all such handle the harp and organ. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. And Tubal-Cain, traditionally, is the first person who makes weapons of war.
there you go.
And Lamech, back to Lamech, descendant of Cain, said unto his wives Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Well, what I see in that is this proclivity of this murderous capacity of Cain as it manifests itself as society develops to a murderous intent that transcends the mere killing of a brother. You hurt me, I hurt you back. It's no, you hurt me, I kill you and 6 other people. And the thing that happens after that is to not make it 7 people, but to make it 70 people. And so there's this idea that once that first murderous seed is sown, it has this proclivity to manifest itself exponentially. And that's a warning. And that's also why I think Tubal Cain, who's one of Cain's descendants, was the first person who made weapons of war. And that's pretty much the story of Cain and Able. And it's a hell of a story, as far as I can tell. And I think it's worth thinking about pretty much forever, because
Yep.
there's so many, it has so many facets, you know. And I think the most usefully revealing of those facets is the potential for the story, once understood, to shed light on not your own failure, not even on your rejection by being, let's say, but on the proclivity to murder the best and the best in you for revenge upon that violation. Because what that means, and we know that knowledge of good and evil entered the world, so to speak, with Adam and Eve's transgression, is that now not only does humanity have to contend with tragedy and suffering, and even the unharvested fruits of proper sacrifice, but with the introduction of real malevolence into the world. So there's the fall into history, and then there's the discovery of sacrifice as a medication for the fall. And then there's a counterposition, which is the emergence of malevolence as the enemy of proper sacrifice. And that's where we're left at the end of Cain and Able. And that's the end of that lecture. Thank you.
Good stopping point. All right, from here on, he does the questions and answers, which we're not going to go over. And we've got only 8 minutes left. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that can be read in that story. And the idea that Cain's sons were the ones who made weapons of war, the first weapons of war. So now you've got this evil and this murderous spirit just going through all of Cain's line. And I believe it comes up later in the Bible that Cain's offspring and also the offspring of somebody else are the ones who stir up trouble in the other biblical stories. So yeah, it's really interesting stuff how they flesh all this out, because I mean, like, I didn't know before I did the Peterson stuff that, you know, it had all these intricate details and how full-fleshed it is as far as a mythology. Not to say that, you know, there is history in there, but yeah. Sean says, that's truth, Pam. Thank you. I appreciate it. So yeah, we'll start up on Biblical Series 6 next week. And I want to thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it. You all are wonderful and beautiful, and I enjoy your company. And I'm thinking maybe some night next week or something like that. If anybody has, you know, let me know if you have a birthday coming up, because I want to hold a birthday party stream. First off, I wanted to say that. And then second, I wanted a night just to talk to you guys, you know, and maybe do a stream like Survival does, where we're just shooting the breeze, that sort of thing. Yeah, so just having fun some night. So when would be, Sean says, thank you for the great show again. You're very welcome. When would be a good time for you all to have just a shooting the breeze kind of stream. Oh, Hillbillies Live, country style show. That's awesome. Yeah, we'll be done in a few minutes there, Lawrence, and we can all hop over onto Hillbillies. I'm gonna spend some time with Mary Lou. But yeah, when would be a good time, day, anything like that for you guys to just have a sit and shoot the breeze, sort of catch up with one another thing? Because I've been avoiding YouTube because I've been avoiding the news. I don't want to watch the news at all. I'm not going to watch it for another year, I guess. And then as things move into the next election, that's what I'll start paying attention again. So Lawrence says any day works for him. Yeah, Shaman, when's a good time for you? Everybody else who's watching, please, Latin, give me an idea of when would be good for you guys. I'm thinking of doing it on an odd night so I don't interrupt anybody else's stream, sort of thing. So maybe like a Monday or a Tuesday. Well, my Tuesdays are pretty rough. So are my Wednesdays. Samson, inside bark. Hold on a second. There we go. So Tuesday's going to be rough for me. Sunday is Greg Kelly's stream, and so I guess that leaves just Monday. So if Monday we can do a maybe not next week, but the week after, to see how I responded to the hive shot thing. But yeah, let's do that. And I'll shoot people a text and you guys can inform others. But I just like to be able to hang out and talk, because I haven't been able to do that. I haven't been coming up on Survival's Lives or anything like that. So I miss you all. So yeah, Monday is good. Good. Any day for you too, Shaman? Awesome. All right. So we'll do Monday. Let's do a couple of them. Let's do this Monday. And we will do, we can put it at 6:00. So, Survival can make it. And yeah, and that'll be fun. So, all right. Well, I'm going to let you guys go over to Hillbilly now. Again, thank you. I really appreciate it. You guys are wonderful. And you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Don't forget, Greg Kelly Show, hopefully tomorrow. So, all right. Bye, guys.